Hi there, let's get started. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
I stood on my parents' front porch with a beat-up backpack digging into my shoulder, the strap frayed from places most people only see on the news. The door was already open, music spilled out loud, and polished the kind you play when you want neighbors to know something important is happening inside. Laughter followed, not the warm kind, the performative kind. 18 months away, and that was my welcome. I stepped in, careful not to scuff the marble floor. The house looked exactly the same, expensive, spotless, and allergic to honesty. Crystal glasses lined the counter. Catering trays waited under silver lids. My father's voice cut through everything, sharp and confident, giving instructions like he was running a boardroom instead of a living room. He turned, saw me, and his face tightened. Not surprise, not relief, annoyance. "Oh, you're back," he said, like I just reminded him of an unpaid parking ticket. Before I could even say hi, he grabbed a folded apron from a chair and tossed it at my chest. It hit me and slid down to the floor. "Good timing," he said. "The housekeeper's sick. Go help in the kitchen, and change. Don't let guests see you dressed like that." I looked down at myself. Plain jeans, faded boots, a gray hoodie with a small tear near the cuff. Clothes that had survived dust, heat, and worse. Clothes that didn't belong in his version of success. "I just got in," I said. My voice was calm. I'd learned how to keep it that way. And he replied, "This isn't a hotel." That was the hug. That was the welcome home. I bent down, picked up the apron, and tied it around my waist. The muscle memory kicked in, secure, not quick pull. He was already turning away, barking orders into his phone. As I passed the hallway table, I reached into my backpack and pulled out the small box I'd wrapped the night before leaving base. It wasn't flashy, no logo, no receipt. Just something that had weight in my hand and meaning behind it. "Dad," I said, holding it out, "I brought you something." He covered the phone's microphone with one finger and glanced at the box like it might stain his suit. Later, he said, "This is important." The finger lifted. His tone softened instantly. "Jessie, sweetheart, did it really break?" "Oh no, your nail." I stood there while he listened to my sister cry about a chipped manicure. I listened to him coo, promise, reassure. Then he pulled out his wallet, didn't even lower his voice. "I'll send you $500, he said. "Go to the best spa. Don't stress." He hung up, smiling. $500 for a nail. He finally noticed I was still there. The box was still in my hand. "What is it?" he asked. "Just something from work," I said. He waved it off. "I'm busy, put it somewhere, or throw it in a drawer." I watched him turn back to the party prep like the conversation was finished. The box felt heavier now, like it knew it didn't belong here either. I slid it back into my bag and set the bag against the wall out of the way. The kitchen was already crowded. Caterers moved fast, professional, efficient. No one asked who I was. They just assumed I worked there. That part felt familiar. I chopped, I carried trays, I wiped counters. My father passed through twice without looking at me. When he did look, it was to point at something I'd missed. A fingerprint on glass, a spoon out of place. Jessica breezed in an hour later. Perfume first, phone held high. Recording herself walking through the house. "Pre-party vibes," she said to her screen. "Dad's merger party tonight. Big money energy." She noticed me behind her reflection in the oven door. "Oh my God," she laughed, turning the camera slightly so her followers could see. "My sister's back. Say hi, Elena." I didn't look up. "She's helping out," my dad said from the doorway. "She's good at that." Jessica leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound kind. "Still doing that nurse thing?" she asked. "Must be exhausting. It keeps me busy," I said. She smiled the way people do when they think they've won something. Then she turned back to her phone and walked away, already bored. By late afternoon, the house was buzzing. Suits, dresses, laughter that came a little too loud, a little too often. My father moved through it all like a king inspecting his court. Every handshake was a transaction. Every smile came with a price tag. I stayed in the background. Invisible works for me. At one point, he stopped near the kitchen island and said loud enough for 2 guests to hear, "Make sure the help doesn't wander into the main room." The help, singular, Maripod. I nodded because arguing would have taken more energy than it was worth. While I poured drinks, I caught snippets of conversation. The merger, the valuation, the numbers that made people's eyes light up. I heard my father brag about how far his family had come, how his daughter Jessica understood image branding influence. No mention of me. That part was consistent. A man in a navy blazer watched me work for a moment, then said, "You're very calm under pressure." I looked up, surprised. "I've had practice." He smiled. "Doing this, something like that," I said. My father swooped in immediately, laugh ready. "She's just helping out. You know how kids are. No real career yet." The man nodded politely, but his eyes stayed on me a second longer than necessary. My father waited until he left, then leaned in. "Don't oversell yourself," he said quietly. "People here matter." I met his eyes. "So do I." He scoffed. "If that were true, you wouldn't be wearing an apron in my kitchen." That one landed. Not because it was new, but because it was familiar. The kind of line you hear so often it almost starts to sound factual. Almost. As the sun dipped lower, I stepped outside for a moment just to breathe air that didn't smell like money and pretense. I rested my hands on the railing and let the noise fade behind me. Here's the thing people don't tell you sometimes. The hardest room to walk into isn't the one full of strangers. It's the one full of people who decided who you were years ago and never bothered to update the file. Have you ever walked back into a place you came from and realized they didn't miss you? They just missed controlling the version of you they understood. I pushed the patio door closed behind me and let the noise hit my ears again. Music forks, voices overlapping. I wiped my hands on the apron and went back inside because standing still outside doesn't change anything. Dinner started exactly on time. That mattered to my father. Punctuality, optics control. Long table, white linens, chairs arranged like a seating chart for influence. I stayed near the kitchen, refilling glasses, clearing plates before anyone had to ask. Jessica arrived late on purpose. She always did. Entrance timing was part of her brand. She swept in wearing something expensive and uncomfortable, arm looped through a man who smiled too much and blinked too often. Her fiancé. The one everyone called self-made. The one whose watch looked real if you didn't stare too long. "Sorry we're late," she said. "Not sorry at all. Traffic." My father stood to greet them like royalty. "There she is, my star." They kissed cheeks. He pulled her chair out. The man shook my father's hand with both of his. Leaning in like he wanted a secret, "Zit," my dad said to them. "Best seats." I set down bread baskets and poured wine. No one asked my name. No one needed it. Conversation rolled forward on rails. Deals, trips, private schools. Jessica laughed loudly at jokes that weren't funny. Her fiancé talked about exits and leveraging opportunities without saying anything that meant something. My father ate it up. "So proud of you," he told her, lifting his glass. "You understand value." She smiled at me across the table like she'd heard that sentence 1,000 times and never got tired of it. Someone asked what I did. It came from the far end, casual, polite. "I work in military healthcare," I said, while placing a plate in front of them. My father didn't even wait a second. "She's a nurse," he said, chuckling. "Well, more like a glorified nurse. Helps out. Nothing fancy." A few people laughed because he laughed. I kept my hand steady as I poured. "Must be rewarding," the woman said. "It is," I replied. My father leaned back in his chair. "She likes to exaggerate. You know how kids are. Thinks scrubs make them heroes," Jessica added. "At least she's employed. That's good, right?" Her fiancé nodded. "Honest work. Honest." Like it was a consolation prize. Plates clinked. Someone changed the subject to real estate. My father was back in his element, gesturing with his fork, explaining margins like he'd invented them. Halfway through the main course, he decided to make a point. "You know," he said loud enough to reset the table, "Jessica made more from one Instagram post last month than Elena makes in a year." That got attention. Jessica tilted her head modestly. "Dad," what he said. "It's impressive. She understands how the world works." A few people looked at me, then back to their plates. No one contradicted him. No one wanted to be awkward. I cleared a plate with dried sauce stuck to it. Pressure, twist, lift, easy, different paths someone offered weakly. My father waved it off. "Some paths lead somewhere, others keep you busy." Jessica's fiancé leaned forward. "You should think about pivoting," he told me. "Healthcare content does well online. Maybe you could film yourself changing bandages or something." I met his eyes. "I'm good where I am." My father smiled thinly. "Don't be sensitive. This is a big night. Tomorrow we'll have serious guests. VIPs, important people." He looked straight at me. "I don't want you talking to them," he said. They don't need to hear about that. He gestured vaguely in my direction. We're presenting a certain image. I nodded once. Understood. The relief on his face was immediate, control restored. Dessert came out, something expensive and forgettable. My father stood to toast the upcoming merger. He thanked his partners. He thanked his daughter for representing the family so well. He didn't thank the person who served the food. After dinner, people drifted toward the living room. Drinks, low music, deals whispered near the fireplace. I stacked plates and carried them away. As I passed behind my father, he caught my arm. Listen, he said quietly. Just stay out of sight tomorrow. Help where you're useful. I looked at his hand on my sleeve, then at his face. Let go, I said. He did, annoyed. Don't make this difficult. I went back to the kitchen. Later, when most of the guests had moved on to after-dinner drinks, one of my father's friends wandered in, rubbing his temples. Got a headache, he said. Do you have anything? I opened a cabinet, grabbed a glass of water, handed him a couple of pills from my bag. You carry meds around, he asked. Habit. He took them inside. You're very calm, he said. My nephew's a medic. He's the same way. That makes sense, I said. He watched me for a moment. You're not just a nurse, are you? My father appeared in the doorway like he'd been summoned by suspicion. She reads too much, he said quickly. Internet gives people ideas. The man shrugged and left. My father stayed. Don't confuse people, he said. This isn't the place. For what, I asked. For whatever you think you are. I didn't answer. By the time the last guest left, my feet hurt. Not from standing still when I wanted to walk out. Jessica breezed past me on her way upstairs, phone pressed to her ear, laughing. My father checked his watch, already planning tomorrow. I untied the apron and folded it neatly on the counter. Muscle memory again. Clean exit, no mess. As I picked up my backpack, my father glanced over. Tomorrow, he said, wear something nicer, or don't be seen. I met his eyes, calm as ever. I'll manage, I said. And I meant it. I woke up early without an alarm the way I always do. Habit doesn't turn off just because you're sleeping under your childhood roof. I showered, changed into clean jeans and a plain shirt, and stepped downstairs before the house filled with noise. The backyard was already active. Tables were being repositioned, flowers trimmed. The gardener worked near the hedges, moving fast, focused on making everything look perfect for people who wouldn't notice the details anyway. My father stood on the patio with his coffee, issuing instructions like a general who'd never seen a battlefield. Careful with those roses, he said. They cost more than your truck. The gardener nodded and kept cutting. I was pouring myself water when I heard the sound, metal slipping, a sharp intake of breath, then a wet thud that doesn't belong in a quiet morning. The gardener dropped his shears. Blood hit the stone. It wasn't dramatic, no screaming, just a deep slice across the palm opening, fast, red, and heavy. He froze, eyes wide, not sure what to do with his own hand. My father recoiled like the blood might jump. Jesus, he snapped. Be careful, you're getting it everywhere. The gardener wrapped his other hand around the wound, already losing color in his face. I was moving before anyone told me to. Sit, I said, grabbing a towel from the counter on my way out. Now. He hesitated. People always do. Authority doesn't come from volume. It comes from certainty. He sat. I knelt, took his hand, applied pressure exactly where it needed to be. Firm, direct, no wasted motion. How long ago, I asked. Just now, he said, breathing too fast. Good, I replied. You're going to be fine. Blood soaked through the towel, almost immediately. Deep cut, clean edge, nasty angle. My father hovered behind me, irritated. Do you have to do this here? It's making a mess. Get me clean water, I said without looking up. And something to tie off. He didn't move. I glanced back at him. Now. He flinched, surprised by the tone, then waved someone else over. A worker ran inside. I elevated the hand-adjusted pressure-checked capillary refill with my thumb. Still good. The gardener watched my face like it was a monitor. You feel dizzy, I asked. A little. Look at me, I said. Not the blood. He did. I slowed my voice on purpose. Calm travels faster than panic. The worker came back with water and a strip of cloth. I rinsed the wound just enough to see it clearly. Then compressed again, tighter this time, tied it off with a knot that wouldn't slip. Bleeding slowed, then stopped. From cut to control under 30 seconds. The gardener exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a year. Thank you, he said. I nodded. You'll need stitches. I'll drive you to urgent care if you want. He looked at my father. My father scowled. I'll have someone take you. Don't drip on the seats. That was his concern. I stood, wiped my hands on the ruined towel, and tossed it in the trash. One of my father's friends had been watching from the edge of the patio. He stepped closer, impressed despite himself. That was professional, he said. You didn't even hesitate. I shrugged. It's what I do. My father laughed, sharp and dismissive. She's seen a few things online. Thinks she's on some medical show. The man raised an eyebrow. That didn't look like YouTube. My father cut him off. Trust me, it's nothing. The gardener was helped to his feet, still pale but steady. As they led him away, he looked back at me. You didn't freak out, he said quietly. No point, I replied. Freaking out doesn't stop bleeding. When they were gone, my father rounded on me. You embarrassed me, he said. I blinked. By stopping him from bleeding, you took control. He snapped. In front of people. There was blood, I said. Someone needed to act. He scoffed. That's all you're good at, cleaning up messes. The words landed exactly where he aimed them. He gestured at the stained stone. Look at that. Now it'll have to be replaced. I can scrub it, I said. That's not the point, he replied. The point is knowing your place. I looked at him then. Really looked. The expensive watch, the pressed shirt, the man who measured worth in optics and invoices. You don't know who you're talking to, I said. He laughed. I know exactly who I'm talking to. I held his gaze. No, you don't. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Doubt, maybe, or irritation that I hadn't folded. Then it was gone. Get changed, he said. Guess we'll start arriving soon, and stay in the background. I walked back inside, my pulse steady. The kitchen smelled like disinfectant and coffee. I washed my hands slowly, methodically, like I always do. As I dried them, my fingers brushed the edge of my backpack sitting by the wall. Inside it, tucked into a side pocket, was the small box I'd tried to give him the day before. It wasn't worth money, no appraisal, no resale value. Just a piece of shrapnel that missed my carotid by inches, and a tag with a date burned into it. A reminder that timing matters, that seconds count. He didn't want it, that was fine. I zipped the bag closed and slung it over my shoulder. Outside, staff moved faster now. Voices rose. Preparations tightened. My father's world was spinning up to full speed, and he had no idea how fragile it actually was. I adjusted the strap of my backpack and set it down behind the bar, then rolled my sleeves once neat and even. The house had shifted gears without asking my permission. What had been preparation was now performance. Cars lined the driveway, engines idled, doors opened and closed in soft, expensive thuds. Voices carried in controlled bursts, people warming up their personalities before stepping inside. My father straightened his tie in the hallway mirror and smiled at his own reflection like it was an accomplice. Remember, he said without turning around, you're helping tonight. Drinks, glasses, nothing else. I nodded. Words would have been extra. He stepped outside to greet the first wave of guest posture, tall laugh, ready. Every handshake came with a name drop. Every hug landed half a second longer than necessary. This was his natural habitat. I stayed behind the bar, lining up bottles by height labels forward. Whiskey, vodka, gin, muscle memory again. Control where you can find it. People flowed in, suits, dresses, perfume layered over money. I poured drinks and slid them across marble, my eyes up just long enough to meet theirs, then down again. Invisible but efficient. That combination makes people comfortable. Jessica appeared halfway through the crowd, already holding her phone up, narrating something to an audience that wasn't there. Big night, she said to no one in particular. Dad outdid himself. She leaned against the bar, blocking access to the ice. Can I get a red, the good one? I poured it. She watched me like I was part of the decor. You're really leaning into the help role, huh? I handed her the glass. Someone has to make sure things run smoothly. She smirked. Just don't embarrass us. I met her eyes. I won't. She laughed, satisfied, and drifted back toward the living room. My father clinked his glass to get attention. Friends, he announced, voice carrying, thank you all for coming. Tonight means a lot to me. Applause followed. Polite. Calculated. There's someone special joining us later. He continued. A man whose presence alone elevates any room. That got murmurs. A true patriot, he said. A leader, a 4-star general. The room leaned in. I paused mid-pour just long enough to register the words, then finished filling the glass. Ice cracked. Liquid settled. Nothing in my hands shook. Jessica gasped theatrically. "Dad, you didn't tell me that." My father smiled. I wanted it to be a surprise. A few guests whispered names. Speculation bloomed. Military titles have that effect. Rank travels faster than truth. Someone near the bar asked, "Which general?" My father waved a hand. "You'll see." He moved through the room, basking in the curiosity. I stayed where I was. Bars are good places to watch people reveal themselves. Alcohol speeds it up. As the night deepened, the anticipation thickened. Guests checked their watches. Conversations kept circling back. "Do you think he'll actually come?" "He wouldn't say it if it wasn't real. He's got connections." My father soaked it in, occasionally glancing at the door, like it owed him something. I kept pouring. At one point, he appeared behind the bar, lowering his voice. "When he arrives, you stay here." "Of course," I said. "I mean it," he pressed. "Do not approach him. Do not speak unless spoken to. This isn't your world." I set a glass down and looked at him. "I understand." He searched my face, suspicious, then nodded and walked away. Minutes later, Jessica came back annoyed. "Why is it taking so long?" she asked. "My followers are getting bored. Important people don't rush," I said. She rolled her eyes. "You always say things like that." The front door opened again. A ripple moved through the room, but it was just another investor. The collective disappointment was almost funny. I wiped the counter, slow and deliberate. When the real arrival happened, there was no announcement, just a shift. The room went quiet in stages, like sound being dialed down instead of cut off. Conversations thinned. People turned. Two men entered, first alert without being obvious. Suits that fit too well. Eyes that tracked exits automatically. Then he walked in. Tall, straight-backed. Hair silver at the temples. Not flashy. No medals. No need. My father rushed forward, practically vibrating. "General Thorne," he said, voice suddenly softer, smaller. "What an honor," the general nodded once. "Mr. Vance." No smile, no handshake linger, just acknowledgement. Guests parted to make space. Phones lowered. Jessica froze mid-record, then hurriedly angled her camera. My father gestured grandly. "Please make yourself comfortable." The general scanned the room. His eyes moved differently than everyone else's. Slower, assessing. They passed over me at the bar. Then came back. Just for a beat. My father noticed and stepped in front of the line of sight. "Can I get you a drink or water?" the general said. My father turned, snapping his fingers. "Elena, water." I filled a glass, chilled, no ice. Set it on a coaster, carried it over and placed it in front of him without a word. "Thank you," he said, looking at me directly. "You're welcome," I replied. My father cleared his throat. "She's helping out," he said quickly. "Family." The general nodded already. Shifting his attention, I returned to the bar. Jessica whispered loudly to someone, "That's him." My father launched into conversation, eager, deferential. He talked about business, about patriotism, about values. The general listened, expression unreadable. At one point, the general asked, "You said your daughter serves." My father laughed, a practiced sound. "Oh, she's a nurse. Helps out on bases. Nothing major." The general's eyes flicked toward the bar again. I kept pouring. "Good of her to support," the general said. "Of course," my father replied. "But I didn't bring her out. No need to distract you with that." I felt my jaw tighten, then relax. Control. Always control. Jessica drifted closer to the bar, wine glass in hand, attention bouncing between the general and her reflection. She leaned in, bumped my arm, and red wine splashed across my shirt. "Oh," she said, smiling. "Oops." The stain spread fast, dark against gray. She tilted her head. "Maybe go clean up before the general notices. You're kind of ruining the look." A few people chuckled. I looked down at the mess, then back up at her. "Excuse me," I said. I walked toward the bathroom, shoulders straight, pulse steady. The music swelled again behind me. Laughter resumed. Glasses clinked. As I closed the door and turned on the sink, I caught my reflection in the mirror, wine on my shirt. Blood still under my nails. No one had noticed. I washed my hands carefully, scrubbing until the water ran clear. Then I looked up again and stepped back into the noise. I patted my shirt dry with paper towels, then smoothed it down like fabric could forget what just happened. The stain stayed. Good, it made me easier to place. When I stepped back into the room, the general was still standing near the center glass of water untouched. My father hovered at his side, leaning in just enough to look important without getting in the way. Jessica had repositioned herself to be seen from every angle. I moved behind the bar again. Bottles, glasses, the familiar weight of work. My hands knew what to do even when people didn't. The general asked a question I didn't hear something short. My father answered too fast. "Yes, sir. Absolutely," he said. "We're very proud of our country." The general nodded, eyes steady. "And your family?" My father smiled. "Traditional, values, hard work." "Your daughter," the general said casual. "You mentioned she serves." My father laughed lightly. "Oh, that. She's around, helps out, nursing, you know how it is." "I do," the general replied. My father seized the opening. "She's not, how do I put this, not exactly in your line of work, sir. More support staff. I didn't want to bring her up and waste your time." The general's gaze slid past him straight to the bar. I kept my posture neutral. Eyes down, pour, slide, reset. "You don't waste my time," the general said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. My father flushed. "Of course not, I just meant..." The general raised a hand. Conversation over. A server passed by with a tray. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke that hadn't landed. The room adjusted itself again. My father leaned closer to the general, lowering his voice. "If you need anything, sir, anything at all, actually," the general said. "I'd like to meet her." The sentence dropped clean and sharp. My father blinked. "Meet who?" "Your daughter," the general said. "The one who serves." My father's smile tightened. "She's busy," he said quickly. "Working. You don't need to." The general's eyes stayed on him. "I'd like to." A pause stretched. Long enough for people nearby to notice something was off. Long enough for Jessica to stop smiling. My father turned his head slowly, scanning the room like he'd misplaced a coat. His eyes landed on me behind the bar. "No," he said, barely audible. Then louder to the general. "She's not present right now." The general didn't look away from him. "I see her." Every head near the bar turned. My father's face hardened. He walked toward me with quick, angry steps. "What are you doing out here?" he hissed. "I told you to stay out of sight." "I'm working," I said. "You look like a mess," he snapped, glancing at my shirt. "Go back way, now." The general's voice cut through the air. "Is that how you speak to your family?" My father spun around, startled. "Sir, she's just what the general asked." My father swallowed. "Just a nurse." The general nodded once. "Then she's more useful than most people in this room." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Jessica's phone dipped. My father laughed forced. "You're very kind, sir." The general stepped closer to the bar. "Miss," I met his eyes. "Yes. What's your name?" "Elena." He held my gaze for a moment. Longer than politeness, shorter than recognition. Then he nodded again as if filing something away. "Thank you for the water," he said. "You're welcome," I replied. My father moved between us, physically blocking the space. "If you'll excuse us," he said. "Elena needs to..." A sharp intake of breath cut him off. A woman near the edge of the room staggered. Her hand flew to her throat. A glass shattered on the floor. Then she went down. It happened fast. Faster than conversations usually break. 1 second she was upright, the next she was seizing, body-stiff, breath gone. People froze. Someone screamed. "Call 911, my father shouted, voice cracking. "Is there a doctor here?" No one answered. Phones came out. Jessica lifted hers automatically, eyes wide already, framing the shot. The woman's lips turned blue. I was moving before my father finished the sentence. "Elena, don't," he yelled, stepping into my path. "You're not a doctor. Don't touch her." I didn't slow down. He grabbed my arm, hard. I shoved him, not gently. He stumbled back and hit the floor, shock replacing anger. The room went silent. "Kneel," I said to the nearest man. "Now." He dropped. "You?" I pointed. "Move the table, clear space." People obeyed. They always do when the voice is right. I knelt beside the woman, checked airway, pulse, pupils. No breathing, jaw clenched, tongue obstructing. "Open her mouth," I said to no one in particular. Someone did. I tilted her head, swept, nothing. Her chest didn't rise. "Clock," I said. "Start counting out loud." A voice started counting seconds. I repositioned her, adjusted her neck, tried again. Still nothing. "She's choking," someone said uselessly. "Quiet," I said. My father scrambled up. "This is insane," he shouted. "Get her off her. She's going to kill her." The general stepped forward. "If you touch her," he said to my father, voice low and absolute, "I will treat it as an assault on an officer." The word landed. "Officer," my father froze. I reached into my pocket, already knowing what was in there. My knife wasn't there. I'd left it in the bag. I scanned the room. A catering knife sat on a tray nearby. "Bring me that," I said. Someone handed it to me. "Alcohol," I added. A bottle appeared. I poured it over the blade over my hands over the woman's neck. "Turn her head," I said. "Keep counting." Her airway was swelling fast. I could feel it. I didn't hesitate. I made the cut, clean, precise, where it needed to be. A collective gasp rippled through the room. I inserted, adjusted, cleared. Then air. The woman's chest rose. Once, then again. She sucked in a breath like she'd been underwater too long. The room exhaled. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. I stayed where I was, hands steady, holding the airway open until professionals took over. When the paramedics arrived, they nodded at my work without asking questions. I stood as they loaded her onto the stretcher, blood drying on my hands, heart rate finally slowing. My father stared at me like he'd never seen me before. The general stepped closer, eyes on my hands. And for the first time that night, my father had nothing to say. I didn't look up when the paramedics took over. I didn't need to. Their hands were steady, their questions short, their eyes already confirming what they were seeing. "Airway secured," one of them said, checking my work. "Swelling was progressing fast," I replied. "She lost spontaneous breathing for about 40 seconds. He nodded once. No skepticism, just information moving from one professional to another. They loaded her onto the stretcher. Oxygen on, IV in, monitor beeping with a rhythm that meant she was still here. As they rolled her toward the door, the woman's husband, someone important judging by the way people made space for him, grabbed my arm. "You saved her," he said, voice shaking. "You saved my wife." I gently removed his hand. "They'll take it from here. Stay with her." He nodded, tears cutting through the polish of his evening suit, and followed the stretcher out. The room didn't know what to do with itself. Some people clapped, then stopped when they realized clapping felt wrong. Others stared at the floor. A few stared at me like I'd violated the laws of physics instead of anatomy. Jessica lowered her phone slowly, eyes wide. For once, she hadn't caught the right angle. My father stood frozen near the center of the room. Mouth slightly open, color drained from his face. He looked smaller without his voice. I set the knife down carefully on the tray. Blood had dried along the handle. I wiped my hands with a towel, slow, methodical. No rush now. The rush was over. The general stepped closer. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at my hands, then my face. "How long?" he asked quietly. "Since she went down to restored airway," I said. "About 2 minutes." He nodded. "Under pressure." "Yes, sir." My father found his voice. "Sir, this was reckless," he said, trying to stand tall again. "She had no authorization." If something had gone wrong, the general turned his head toward him, and the rest of the sentence died on my father's tongue. "What would you have done?" the general asked. My father hesitated. "Called emergency services. They arrived," the general said. After, silence stretched. "You told me she was a nurse," the general continued. My father forced a laugh. "That's what she is." Technically, the general repeated. He looked back at me. "Where did you learn that procedure?" "Combat trauma rotation," I replied. Repeated exposure. A ripple went through the guests. "The word combat does that." My father snapped. "She exaggerates." The general didn't even glance at him this time. "Kandahar," the general said. The word landed like a dropped plate. My head lifted slightly. "Yes, sir. You were there in 22, he continued. "Yes. Field hospital. Forward unit. Yes." My father took a step back. The general inhaled, then exhaled slowly, like he was steadying something old. "I thought I recognized your hands," he said. I felt the room lean in without realizing it. The general straightened his jacket, then turned fully toward me. He took one deliberate step forward, closing the distance my father had tried so hard to control all night. He reached out. Not to shake my hand, he took it. My fingers were still stained. Blood under the nails, no soap ever gets rid of completely. He didn't flinch. In front of everyone, business partners, influencers, investors, people who thought power was loud. He bowed his head and pressed his lips to the back of my hand. The room went dead silent. This, he said, voice steady and carrying, is not the hand of a nurse. My father's knees buckled. He caught himself on the back of a chair. This is the hand of Major Dr. Elena Vance, the general continued. The surgeon who kept my airway open for 12 hours under fire while my unit was being evacuated. The woman who operated through mortar strikes and didn't lose a single patient that night. A few people gasped. Others stared openly now. No one looked away. She saved my life, he said, and the lives of my men. He released my hand gently. If she hadn't been there, he added, I wouldn't be standing in your living room tonight. My father shook his head, whispering, No, that's not. The general turned to him at last. You dismissed her, he said. You ordered her out of sight. You called her a glorified nurse. My father tried to speak. No sound came out. The general scanned the room. Let me be clear, he said. If any of you are here because of respect for service, courage, or competence, this is what it looks like. Eyes shifted. People recalculated. I finally pulled my hand back and wiped it on the towel, not because of the blood, but because I needed something familiar to hold. My father lunged toward me, desperate. Elena, he said. Voice cracking, I didn't know. You should have told me. I looked at him. Really looked. I tried, I said. Jessica pushed forward, face pale. Dad didn't mean it like that, she said quickly. We're proud of you, we just stop, I said. The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The general turned to me. Are you finished here? He asked. I glanced around the room. The overturned chairs, the spilled wine, the faces that had decided my worth 5 minutes ago. Yes, I said, I am. He nodded once. Then let's go. He motioned toward the door. A vehicle waited outside, engine already running. As I walked past my father, he reached for me again. Please, he said, we can talk. I didn't slow down. I don't belong here, I said. You were right about that. The general held the door open. Cool air rushed in, cutting through perfume and panic. I stepped out without looking back. And for the first time since I'd arrived, the noise stopped following me. The night didn't end when I stepped outside. It just moved faster inside without me. I felt it before I heard it, the shift that happens when people realize they bet on the wrong thing. The kind of silence that isn't calm, just empty. The general walked a half step behind me, not escorting, not guarding, just present. The car door closed. The engine idled. Behind us, the house was still lit up like nothing had happened, but the sound had changed. Voices weren't confident anymore. They were sharp, defensive. The general didn't ask where I wanted to go. He didn't need to. You did exactly what you were trained to do, he said, eyes forward. Under worse conditions than this. I nodded. It wasn't complicated. It never is, he replied. It's just hard. Inside the house, my father finally found someone who would listen. This is a misunderstanding, he said loudly. Too loudly. She never told us. How was I supposed to know one of his partners? Someone who'd been smiling all night looked at him with a different expression now. Cooler, measured. You called her a glorified nurse, the man said. In front of everyone. My father waved his hands. That was family talk. You know how daughters exaggerate their importance. The man didn't smile. She didn't exaggerate anything. Another voice joined in. You let her serve drinks while she had blood under her nails. Someone else added. The general heard you lie. That word hung in the air. Lie. Jessica tried to regain control, phone back in her hand. Voice trembling but practiced. Guys, let's not overreact, she said. This is still a great opportunity. My dad's company. A woman cut her off. You filmed a medical emergency. Jessica froze. I didn't post it. But you thought about it, the woman said. That's enough. My father's assistant pulled him aside, whispering urgently. My father shook his head in denial, then laughed like that might fix it. No, he said. This doesn't change anything. The merger's already in motion. The assistant swallowed. They're pulling out. What? My father snapped. Both firms, the assistant said. They don't want to be associated with this. This, my father echoed. The assistant gestured vaguely toward the door, toward me, toward the general, toward the truth. My father staggered back a step. Jessica rushed to him. Dad, it's fine, she said. We can handle this. Elena can help. She owes us. That word didn't travel far before it died. The general's aide stepped inside, briefly, phone to his ear. He listened, nodded once, then spoke quietly to the general. Confirmed, the aide said. Contract withdrawn. The general didn't react. He didn't need to. My father heard anyway. He broke. Elena, he shouted, rushing toward the door. Wait, please. I stopped. Not for him. For myself. I turned. He stood there, tie loose hair out of place, eyes frantic. The man who'd always been so sure of his place now looked unmoored. I didn't know, he said again, desperate. If I had known... You did know, I said calmly. You just didn't care. That's not fair, he snapped. I pushed you. I was motivating you. I shook my head. You erased me. Jessica pushed past him, tears streaking her makeup. Please, she said, grabbing my arm. My fiancé's gone. He emptied the accounts. I need help. I gently removed her hand. That's between you and your choices. She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. We're family. You've never treated me like it, I replied. My father stepped closer, lowering his voice. We can fix this, he said. Come back inside. Talk to them. Tell them you forgive us. I looked at the room behind him. The people who wouldn't meet my eyes now. The ones recalculating how close they'd stood to him. I don't forgive lies, I said. I move on from them. The general waited without rushing me. That mattered. My father's voice cracked. I was proud of you. I just didn't know how to say it. I met his eyes steady. Pride without respect is just noise. He opened his mouth, closed it, nodded weakly like he was agreeing with something too late to change. Jessica sobbed quietly. Phone forgotten in her hand. I turned away. The general opened the car door again. I got in. The seat was cool, clean, real. As we pulled away, I saw the house shrink in the side mirror. Lights still on, party still breathing barely. My father stood in the doorway, smaller than he'd ever been. The general spoke after a moment. You didn't owe them anything. I know, I said. He smiled slightly. That's why you're dangerous. The car merged into traffic. The noise of the night swallowed us. I rested my hands on my knees. The blood was gone now. The stains had faded. What stayed was the quiet. Not the empty kind. The earned kind. The car didn't rush. It moved at the speed of control. The kind that doesn't need sirens or shortcuts. Streetlights slid across the windshield in steady intervals, each one identical to the last. I watched my hands as they rested on my knees. Clean now, no blood, no shaking, just hands. The general broke the silence first. You know, he said, there are rooms where metals matter, and rooms where hands matter more. I glanced at him. Tonight wasn't either of those rooms. He gave a quiet smile. No. It was a room where character finally had nowhere to hide. We stopped at a light. His phone buzzed once. He didn't answer it. They'll talk, he continued. They always do. But by morning, the story won't be about you saving a life. It'll be about why they missed it. That's fine, I said. I don't need the story. I know, he replied. That's why it sticks. We drove a few more blocks before he spoke again. Where are you headed? Anywhere quiet, I said. He nodded. There's a guest house near the base. Secure, no questions. That works. The car turned. The city thinned out. Fewer lights, less noise. Inside the house I'd left behind, the noise was doing the opposite. My father sat at the dining table staring at a contract that no longer mattered. The ink was still wet, but the signatures were already irrelevant. He rubbed his temples like that might rewind the last hour. One of his partners cleared his throat. We need to talk about damage control. There is no control, another said, flatly. You lied to a 4-star general. I didn't lie, my father snapped. I didn't know. That's worse, the partner replied. It means you don't know your own house. Jessica sat on the stairs, scrolling through her phone, watching her follower count dip for the first time in years. Comments poured in faster than she could delete them. Why were you filming? That woman could have died. You laughed at your sister. She closed the app, hands shaking. This isn't fair, she said out loud. I didn't do anything wrong. No one answered her. Upstairs, the guest room door stayed open. My backpack was gone. The apron folded on the counter looked out of place now, like evidence someone wished they'd hidden earlier. Back in the car, we pulled through the gate. The guard saluted the general, then glanced at me, respectful but curious. I stepped out into air that smelled like pine and asphalt. Quiet. Real quiet. Get some rest, the general said. You earned it. Thank you, I replied. For tonight, he asked. For not speaking over me, I said. He nodded once. Good night, doctor. The door closed. The car rolled away. Inside the guest house, the room was simple. Bed, desk, lamp, no mirrors trying to impress anyone. I dropped my bag by the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, boots still on. For the first time since I arrived in town, there was nothing pulling at me. No voices, no expectations, no role to play. I thought about my father's face when the truth finally landed. Not anger, not hatred, confusion. Like a man realizing the map he trusted was upside down. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. People think revenge is loud, that it looks like shouting or walking away in slow motion. Most of the time it's quieter than that. It's the moment someone sees exactly what they chose to ignore, and you don't rush to comfort them through it. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Elena, it's Dad. Please call me." I stared at the screen for a long second. Then I set the phone face down on the desk. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're maintenance. I showered, changed, and lay back on the bed, hands folded over my stomach. Sleep didn't come right away, but it hovered close, patient. Somewhere across town, my father was still trying to explain himself to people who no longer needed him. Somewhere else, Jessica was drafting an apology she didn't understand yet. And here in a quiet room with no audience, I finally let my shoulders drop. Not because I'd proven anything, but because I didn't have to anymore. Morning didn't come with drama, it came with quiet. I woke before sunrise the way I always do, and sat on the edge of the bed long enough to let my body catch up with the fact that nothing was wrong. No alarms, no incoming fire, no voices telling me where to stand. My phone was still face down on the desk. I left it there, I laced my boots, and stepped outside. The air was cool, clean, honest. A few soldiers jogged past, nodding in that way people do when they recognize competence, without needing a backstory. That felt normal. By the time I finished a slow lap around the perimeter, the day had already started doing what days do, moving forward whether people are ready or not. Inside my father's house, time was doing the opposite. He sat in his study suit jacket draped over a chair like a mistake he hadn't thrown away yet. His phone kept lighting up and going dark again. Messages from partners, from advisors, from people who had stopped calling him sir and started calling him Robert. The merger was officially dead by noon, not postponed, not under review, dead. One firm cited reputational risk. Another didn't bother with an explanation. They didn't have to. Everyone in that room the night before had seen the same thing, a man who didn't recognize value when it stood in front of him bleeding and saving lives. That story traveled fast. By mid-morning, articles started popping up online. Not about me, about him. Business leader under fire after public incident. Questions raised about company culture and leadership. Sources cite pattern of behavior. Jessica read them from the couch, makeup smeared, robe half on. Her phone buzzed nonstop, but the notifications weren't congratulations anymore. Sponsors paused campaigns. Comments turned sharp. She tried to call me again. I didn't answer. My father finally did what he should have done years ago. He sat still and listened to himself think. He replayed moments he'd dismissed. The apron, the jokes, the way he'd flinched at blood like it was an inconvenience instead of a warning. He remembered the box I'd tried to give him, the way he hadn't even opened it. For the first time, he wondered what else he'd waved away because it didn't fit the picture he was selling. That realization didn't fix anything. It just made the damage clearer. At the guest house, I packed my bag with the same efficiency I always use. Fold, roll, check. Nothing sentimental, nothing rushed. The general stopped by briefly, already dressed, already focused on the day ahead. "Transportation's ready," he said. "If you want it, I'll take it," I replied. He hesitated, then added, "Your father asked to see you." I considered it, not emotionally, practically. "No," I said, "not today." He nodded. No pressure, no judgment. On the drive out, my phone buzzed again. A text this time. I was wrong. "I see it now, please." I read it once, then deleted it. Seeing isn't the same as changing. And apologies that arrive only after consequences aren't apologies, they're negotiations. The base faded behind us. The city opened up ahead. Traffic, normal life. People arguing over coffee orders and parking spots, unaware that a few hours ago, a woman almost died on a living room floor while someone filmed it. That contrast grounded me. At the airport, the general shook my hand this time like equals. "Take care of yourself," he said. "I will," I replied. As I walked toward the terminal, I didn't feel like I was leaving anything unfinished. Some doors close on their own when you stop holding them open. On the plane, I took a window seat. The engines hummed, the safety briefing played. Ordinary things doing ordinary work. As we lifted off, I watched the city shrink, not with anger or relief, but with distance. Distance is underrated. It gives you perspective without demanding forgiveness. I thought about the version of me my father had clung to, the one he could control, the one he could dismiss. That version had served its purpose for him. It made his world simple. But simple worlds break the moment reality walks in. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need him to understand me. I needed him to stop defining me. And that had already happened. When we leveled out, I pulled the small box from my bag, the one I'd carried across deserts and oceans. I opened it. Inside was the fragment of metal tagged and dated, proof of survival, proof of timing, proof that some things miss you by inches and still change your life. I closed the box and slid it back where it belonged. Back home, wherever that was, now my work waited. Patients who didn't care about my last name, colleagues who didn't ask me to shrink, rooms where hands mattered more than titles. That was enough. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the steady sound of the engines remind me of something simple and true. You don't owe access to people who only respect you when someone else gives them permission. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best? And if the truth finally came out, would you walk back into that room to explain yourself? Or would you choose to leave and let silence say everything? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about dignity, boundaries, and what real strength actually looks like. When I left that house, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel powerful. I felt quiet. Not the empty kind of quiet, but the kind that shows up after you've been holding your breath for years and finally let it out without asking for permission. People assume moments like that come with a rush, with satisfaction, with a sense of I showed them. That's not what it felt like. It felt like realizing how much had been taken from me long before that night, quietly, slowly, in ways that never left a bruise, but still did damage. What they took first wasn't opportunity. It was confidence. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough at a time that I wouldn't notice. A joke here, a comparison there. A label repeated so often it started sounding like a fact. You're just helping. You're not really that. Don't make it a big deal. When someone who's supposed to know you says those things often enough, part of you starts adjusting. You talk less. You explain less. You shrink your language so it doesn't trigger another eye roll. You don't stop being capable. You stop showing it. And the dangerous part is how normal that becomes. I didn't wake up one day thinking I was less than I was. I just learned to stay quiet about the parts of myself that made other people uncomfortable. I learned which rooms required me to play smaller so someone else could feel bigger. That's what people rarely talk about when it comes to family disrespect. It's not always loud. It's not always cruel. Sometimes it's just persistent enough to reshape how you see yourself. For a long time, I thought the solution was simple. Prove it. Be better. Be more accomplished. Be so undeniable that they'd have to change their mind. That idea sounds reasonable. It's also wrong. Because the truth is, people who benefit from underestimating you aren't confused. They're invested. If you've ever been the less impressive one in your family, you know exactly what I mean. Your success doesn't threaten them because it's impossible. It threatens them because it breaks the role they assigned you. And when someone needs you in a role, they will protect that role harder than they protect the truth. That night didn't change how capable I was. It exposed how committed they were to not seeing it. And that realization mattered more than any public moment. Here's the part I didn't understand for years. The issue was never my lack of achievement. It was my willingness to keep seeking validation from people who only valued what they could brag about. Some families don't measure worth by effort, integrity, or impact. They measure it by how easy you are to explain to strangers. If your story doesn't fit neatly into their script, they edit you down until it does. That's not love, that's branding. The moment I stopped internalizing their version of me, something shifted. Not externally, internally. I stopped asking, how do I make them respect me? And started asking, why am I still trying? That question is uncomfortable, because once you ask it honestly, you can't unask it. I realized that every time I walked into that house, I left with less energy than I arrived with, less clarity, less confidence, That's not coincidence. That's information. Your body keeps score long before your mind catches up. If being around someone consistently makes you doubt your own competence, your instincts, or your worth, that's not motivation, that's erosion, and no achievement fixes erosion. What I took back wasn't revenge, it wasn't validation, it was authorship. I took back the right to define myself without translating it into language that made other people comfortable. I took back the right to stop performing humility so someone else wouldn't feel challenged. Most importantly, I took back my attention. Because attention is a currency, and I had been spending mine trying to convince people who weren't buying. That night didn't make me stronger. It showed me where I already was and where I no longer needed to stand. If any part of this sounds familiar, here's something worth sitting with people who truly value. You don't require you to prove your worth repeatedly. They don't need to be shocked into respect. They don't need a public moment to recalibrate how they treat you. And if respect only shows up when someone else forces it into the room, it was never really there. So here's the question I want you to think about honestly, without defending anyone, including yourself. In your life, who benefits from you being seen as less? And what would change if you stopped trying to correct them and started protecting yourself instead? Take your time with that one. For a long time, I believed something that sounds logical on the surface, but quietly ruins people from the inside. I believed that if I just did enough, worked harder, achieved more, collected the right credentials, eventually the people who doubted me would change their minds. They'd see it. They'd admit they were wrong. They'd finally treat me differently. That belief kept me busy for years. It also kept me stuck. Because here's the uncomfortable truth I had to face. Proving yourself only works with people who are open to being proven wrong. And the people who underestimated me were never open to that in the first place. They weren't waiting for evidence. They were protecting a story. In my family's story, I played a specific role. The less impressive one. The support character. The one who existed to make someone else look brighter by comparison. Once you understand that, a lot of confusing behavior starts to make sense. Why your achievements get minimized. Why your explanations get brushed off. Why every success is met with a new standard instead of respect. It's not that they don't hear you. It's that hearing you would require them to rewrite who they think they are. And most people would rather discredit you than do that work. I used to think staying quiet was humility. That explaining myself calmly would eventually lead to understanding. That if I didn't make a scene, respect would follow. What I didn't realize was that my silence was being interpreted as agreement. Every time I swallowed a comment, I reinforced the version of me they preferred. Every time I explained instead of setting a boundary, I taught them that access to me was unlimited. That night changed something, not because I spoke up, but because I didn't explain. I didn't announce who I was. I didn't defend my competence. I didn't argue with the labels they'd given me. I just acted. And when the truth became unavoidable, I didn't rush to manage anyone's feelings about it. That's when the power shifted, not because I finally proved myself, but because I stopped trying to. Here's the part people rarely tell you: the moment you stop proving yourself, some people will get angry, not confused. Angry. Because your effort was never about clarity, it was about control. When you keep explaining yourself, you're still participating in their framework. You're still asking for permission to be taken seriously. You're still treating their approval like a finish line. When you stop, you change the rules of the interaction. That's why silence feels threatening to people who rely on hierarchy. Silence removes their leverage. Boundaries do the same thing. I used to think boundaries were aggressive, like walls you throw up when you're done with someone. In reality, boundaries are just clarity with consequences. They sound like, I'm not discussing this. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that conversation. No speeches, no justification, no emotional labor attached. And here's what surprised me most. The people who respected me didn't need boundaries explained to them. They adjusted immediately. The people who pushed back were the ones benefiting from the lack of them. That's how you know which relationships are built on mutual respect and which ones are built on access. There's a quiet confidence that comes from no longer auditioning for understanding, from letting people sit with their discomfort instead of rushing to soothe it. I didn't become colder, I became clearer. And clarity attracts a different kind of respect. Not the kind that comes with applause or public gestures, but the kind that shows up consistently, privately, and without conditions. If you're listening to this and thinking, but if I don't explain myself, they'll misunderstand me, let me offer you this. People who want to understand you don't need endless explanations. People who don't will use your explanations against you. At some point, you have to decide whether your energy is better spent clarifying your value or protecting it. For me, that decision came the moment I realized how peaceful it felt to stop trying to be seen by people who were committed to misunderstanding me. That peace wasn't passive, it was earned. So if you're still stuck in the cycle of proving, ask yourself this. Not defensively, not emotionally, just honestly. Who in your life keeps raising the bar every time you reach it? And what would happen if you stopped jumping altogether with that? For a long time, I thought walking away meant losing the argument, losing the relationship, losing the chance to finally be understood. That belief keeps a lot of people stuck in places that drain them. It kept me there too. We're taught that endurance is strength, that staying proves loyalty, that if someone is family, you're supposed to tolerate more than you would from anyone else. But adulthood teaches a different lesson, one most people learn late, if at all. Staying is not always strength. Sometimes it's just fear with good manners. I didn't walk away because I was angry. I walked away because I finally understood the cost of staying. The cost wasn't the insults or the comparisons. I'd learned how to absorb those. The real cost was how much of myself I had to leave at the door every time I showed up. My voice got quieter, my posture changed, my instincts hesitated. That's not resilience. That's adaptation to dysfunction. There's a difference between being patient and being erased, and it took me years to see which one I was practicing. People like to talk about forgiveness as if it's the final step in maturity, as if forgiving someone automatically means letting them back in. It doesn't. Forgiveness is internal. Access is optional. You can let go of resentment without reopening the door. You can wish someone well without putting yourself back in a position to be diminished. That distinction matters. When I chose to leave, I wasn't punishing anyone. I wasn't making a statement. I was choosing an environment that didn't require me to constantly defend my existence. And here's what surprised me: once I left, my life didn't get louder. It got quieter, not lonely, clear. The absence of constant tension creates space you don't realize you've been missing. Space to think without rehearsing conversations in your head. Space to succeed without wondering who it will offend. Space to rest without guilt. That space is where self-respect lives. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't argue or convince. It chooses. It chooses where to spend time. It chooses who gets access. It chooses peace over proximity. Walking away doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough about yourself to stop accepting conditions that required you to be smaller. Some people will call that cold. Others will call it selfish. Those words usually come from people who benefited from your silence. Here's something I wish someone had told me earlier: if someone only values you when you are useful, agreeable, or quiet, they don't value you. They value control. And control always resists boundaries. The moment you stop explaining your decisions, stop defending your limits, and stop negotiating your dignity, certain relationships will strain or break. That's not failure. That's filtration. What remains afterward is different. Calmer, more honest. You start meeting people who don't need you to prove your worth because they recognize it instinctively. People who don't confuse love with ownership. People who don't panic when you say no. That's not luck. That's alignment. I didn't cut everyone off. I didn't burn bridges. I simply stopped crossing rivers for people who wouldn't step off the shore. And over time, something subtle but powerful happened. I trusted myself again. I trusted my reactions. I trusted my discomfort. I trusted the part of me that knew when something wasn't right, even if I couldn't explain it perfectly. That trust is what adulthood actually looks like. Not obedience, not endurance, not endless forgiveness, but discernment. Knowing when to stay. Knowing when to speak. Knowing when to leave without needing permission or applause. If you're listening to this and feeling a tightness in your chest, like something is clicking uncomfortably into place, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Ask yourself a question most people avoid, because the answer changes things. In your life right now, where are you staying out of loyalty, fear, or habit? And what would it cost you to keep staying another 5 years? And if you already know the answer, maybe the real question is this: are you ready to choose peace over proximity, even if it means disappointing people who were never willing to see you fully in the first place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories about boundaries, self-respect, and quiet strength resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to talk about.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction created by artificial intelligence to heighten drama and emotion. But the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.